Good morning, Bridget Phillipson. Are you thrilled to hear that the Chancellor may be considering implementing Labour's signature policy of abolishing non-dom status?
Well, let's see what actually happens in the budget. But if they were to do that, it would be an abject humiliation because, Conservative cabinet ministers have spent years rubbishing this idea. If they were to do it, I think it would just demonstrate that it's Labour who are leading the charge where it comes to the battle of ideas in our country.
Well, I suppose the Chancellor, and to my slight surprise, he didn't rule it out, which he has previously done. And I wonder if that, in a way, this might be a problem for you because the Tories are shooting your foxes one by one. One thing that they probably won't do is abolish charitable status for private schools, which was something that last year you said you would do, and then you said you wouldn't. Now, Rachel Reeves is going to have to find money from somewhere. Do you think it's time for you to reconsider that, since you won't be able to get money from non-doms and windfall and all that?
So what I've said on that point is that we would end the tax breaks that private schools enjoy, so VAT and business rates, and we'd put that money directly into our state schools. They are under enormous pressure at the moment. We would use that money to deliver 6,500 more teachers, improve mental health support for our children, which is a really big concern for parents right across our country. And it's something the Chancellor could get up on Wednesday and say immediately that he would do. I'm not convinced he will, because politics is about political choices, and so far they've shown no willingness to give our state schools the investment that they urgently need after 14 years of failure. And that kind of takes us to the core point about this whole budget, really. No matter what the Chancellor says on Wednesday by way of individual measures, nothing can take away from the fact that after 14 years, our country is in worse shape than it has ever been. People are facing enormous pressure on living standards when they go and do their shopping. They can't afford what they used to be able to buy. Their wages aren't going up. And that is about the last 14 years. It really is time for change. It's time for a general election. I wish they would get on and give us a date.
Yes. Well, if there were a general election, polls say that the day after you would be Secretary of State for Education. So let me just ask you this point again. You first said that you would abolish charitable status for private schools. You, a few months ago, put a pause on that, and I'm asking you now, since month by month it looks like you've got less money to play with, would you reconsider abolishing charitable status for private schools, and that would give you another, I think, £1 billion and a half to play with?
Well, not the charitable status, but rather ending the tax breaks. Absolutely, we will press ahead with that. The Independent Institute for Fiscal Studies have been clear that that will raise between £1.3 to £1.5 billion. And if I were Education Secretary, I'd be making sure that money went directly into our state schools, making sure we've got more teachers, better mental health support, more support for our teachers. It is my priority to make sure that state schools, where the vast majority of children and young people in our country will attend, have got the resources and the support that they need in order to make sure that all of our children get a brilliant start in life. So absolutely, if I'm Education Secretary, we will make sure we deliver on that.
If the Chancellor brings in a cut in national insurance, Labour's policy has been that you support any cut in taxes for working people, which that is. If he brings in another national insurance cut this week, will you stand by that or will you reverse it?
Well, I'm not going to get into too much of the speculation about individual measures that we might or might not see, and we'll look carefully at whatever he says in the budget. But ahead of this budget, they've been all over the shop. I mean, we've had a range of different ideas floated. Forgive me for being a bit sceptical about what they might say.
You guys are thinking that you're going to be the next government, and the viewers and voters want to know what you might do. So can we just deal with the question of whether you would reverse any tax cuts that he gives to working people?
Well, you're asking me...
Let's make it a matter of principle.
Sure. You're asking me to engage in a hypothetical on a budget measure that hasn't been announced. But in terms of the principle of what we want to see in the budget, you know, working people are paying more in tax than they've paid since the Second World War. And I don't think it's right that time and again the Conservatives have gone to working people and asked them to contribute more and more. 25 tax rises in the last Parliament alone. And I want to make sure that we've got a fairer tax system overall. That's why those measures that we're talking about in terms of the non-dom tax status, raising money by ending the tax breaks on private schools, closing that loophole on private equity, will give us a really important way of investing in our public services and making sure that we have a fairer tax system overall. But I'm not happy about the fact that working people are being asked to make up all of that. And we've previously opposed the government where they'd sought to increase national insurance in previous budgets.
All right, let's talk about the politics of this week. I know that the Labour position is that had you had a proper Labour candidate in Rochdale, you would have won it and so on. The arithmetic doesn't really hold up. Labour voters didn't stay at home. They simply switched to other candidates, particularly the two non-establishment candidates, Galloway and Tully, who took 60% of the vote. So you wouldn't have beaten George Galloway even if you had had a candidate. Isn't that a topic for worry?
Well, I deeply regret the fact that the party had no other option but to effectively not field a candidate within that by-election to withdraw our support. I'm very sorry that we ended up in that position, but it was necessary, and Keir Starmer took the action that was necessary in order to demonstrate that the Labour Party has changed and that we cannot stand for such unacceptable comments. But what I can say is that come the general election, we will make sure that we've got a great candidate in place that can win back the support of people in Rochdale and can deliver an MP for that community that will bring people together rather than stoking division, which I fear, sadly, is what we're going to see in the months to come.
So you think this is just a one-off? This is not going to be something that might happen, that there might be other candidates? Because one of the things that strikes me, and the Labour Party said it's inquiring into this, the comments that your candidate Azhar Ali made, and for which he was disowned, took place in a meeting of Labour councillors and other Labour officials. And what is striking is that he made these comments about Israel, Gaza, about Jewish control of the media, and not a single person challenged him. Now, what has happened to Labour's inquiries into the other people who are at that meeting? And how do you know that this isn't a view that is held more widely than that single individual?
You'll understand that politicians are not directly involved in investigations into disciplinary matters such as the one that you're talking about. But it is right that all complaints are investigated. The Labour Party has robust processes now in place to make sure that where complaints are received about unacceptable conduct, including the kind of conduct that you've just described, that there will be a full investigation and action will follow where it's merited. But you'll appreciate that I'm not involved in that investigation, nor would I expect to be, and therefore there are limits in terms of what I can say by way of timescale and process around that.
But personally, you'd be unhappy to hear that other people just sat there and took all of this and said nothing about it?
Well, I think, of course, we have a responsibility, each of us, to challenge comments where we hear them, where they are racist or hate-filled or unacceptable or prejudicial. Yeah. So, yes, of course, but all complaints, in terms of the nature and substance of complaints, will be fully investigated in line with our processes. We do have strong processes in place, and of course that was why we ended up in the position of withdrawing our support from the candidate in Rochdale, because of the fact that we will not tolerate unacceptable conduct.
All right, look, one last point. There's a danger, I think, that some people believe that Labour's being a bit complacent here. Isn't there a clear signal, what's happening on the streets, on this vote, that you need to think again about your policy on Gaza? Your colleague Ms Phillips told our Electoral Dysfunction podcast yesterday that there is a clear problem with Muslim communities feeling represented currently by the Labour movement. They've been saying for some time, we're losing faith. Isn't there a deeper problem for Labour?
What I believe is most important where it comes to the position that we take on foreign policy and in other areas such as the one that you're describing is that we do so in a way that is responsible and is in keeping with how we would seek to conduct ourselves if we were to form that next government later this year if the British people put their trust in us. So what we've been saying about the situation for a very long time now is that we do want to see more humanitarian aid getting into Gaza. We want to see the release of hostages, and given the scale of what we're facing at the moment...
But it's not working, is it?
Not working in which sense, sorry?
In terms of your core vote?
Well, I think we have a responsibility to seek to do what is right and what we believe to be the responsible approach, and that is humanitarian aid into Gaza, the release of hostages, and absolutely an immediate humanitarian ceasefire. We all want the fighting to stop. It is intolerable what we are seeing, the scale of human suffering in Gaza, and I remain also deeply concerned about the plight of Israeli hostages too.
OK. Bridget Phillipson, thank you so much for your time this morning.